Welcome to Hey Sister. This is season 2, episode 9, The 4 Basic Skills for Parents and Children, part 2. Hey sister.
Hey sister.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Courtney Lewis.
And I'm Carly Ferguson. Welcome to our Sisterly Phone Call Inspired podcast.
Hop on our calls each week as we interview qualified guest experts and discuss the meaningful and sometimes mundane aspects of our lives.
We're so excited to connect with you, sister. Let's get talking.
Hello and welcome to Hey Sister. It is so good to be with y'all again as we continue our conversation from last week where we're talking about the 4 basic skills. This month, we are focusing on the connections we make within motherhood. So already this month, we've talked about how mothers can inspire their families through pursuing personal and family visions, and also how we can parent toddlers, and specifically talking about no answers with toddlers. We're going to keep these conversations going, and we've already talked about 2 of the 4 basic skills last week, which are disagreeing appropriately and accepting corrections. Today, we're going to continue talking about the other 2 of those 4 basic skills, which are following instructions and accepting no answers. We are so excited to dive into these. Now, I know that we've already talked about accepting no answers for a toddler specifically, but we're going to talk a little bit more about accepting no answers for older children. So we're going to dive into that topic a little further than what we previously have in our interview with Paige 2 weeks ago. So hold on to your hats and buckle in because it's going to be a really fun ride. Carly, why don't you introduce our sisters to today's guest experts?
Yes. So we have our dynamic duo here. They are TSG, or Teaching Self-Government Mentors. And so they specialize in helping parents analyze family relationships and problem solve difficult situations by teaching principles of self-government. They also teach about the structure of a unified family atmosphere and the tools and skills needed for self-mastery, personal freedom, and family unity. So we're excited to get back into it and hear from these wonderful ladies today. So Rachel, Janice, welcome to Hey Sister.
Thanks so much, Carly.
Thank you for having us.
Welcome back. We're so excited to have y'all to wrap us up because you left us on the edge of our seat last week with 2 of the 4 basic skills, but we really need to hear more about these other 2 basic skills that are basic. So we have to know them. They're crucial. So talk to us about these other 2 basic skills. And why don't we start with you, Janice? What skill do you have to talk to us about today?
I have accepting no answers.
Yay.
And I know that Rachel went through the steps, but on this one, I want to just repeat the steps. As always, we look at the person with a calm face, voice, and body. We say okay or ask to disagree appropriately. Then we drop the subject. And that's the hardest part. And this is something that I did not understand. You said, let's talk about older children. I'm the oldest child. I'm 40. And I was like, when I started TSG, I'm like, I'm today years old. And I did not know how to accept no answer.
Dropping that subject.
But that dropping the subject. And once I understood that and started practicing that for myself, it brought me so much freedom. And I want that for my children. And they have this freedom that I didn't have till I was in my mid 30s. And they can have it as toddlers, as young children, as teens. It's really life-changing. And I remember having little ones and feeling so frustrated with my oldest because I would tell him that we would go to the park after nap, or we can bake when we get home from the grocery store. And he would throw a tantrum. And so there was this decision fatigue, like you were mentioning last week. There was well, I might as well say no to everything because he's going to throw a tantrum anyways, even when I say yes. Well, then when I learned the skill of accepting a no answer and understood that accepting a no answer and not getting what you prefer is the same thing, it blew my mind, game changer. And I was like, oh, I was always giving him a no answer. He just needed to learn how to accept it because he preferred everything right now because he was 2 and 3 and still he's 13 and he still wants it right now. I still want things right now. And I can't have that. It's a no answer. And I know what to do now, and he knows what to do now. And so it's just taken so much frustration out of things for us. And we use the exact same steps. every time. And so anytime we can draw that connection for them and for ourselves and notice, oh, it's a no answer, then we know what to do. We can go back to those really simple steps and just repeat them. So the skill of accepting no answers and criticism has been a game changer for our family. That is also another place that it's important to flesh out accepting no answers. It's such a big one. So it's accepting no answers and criticism. So when you don't get what you would prefer, that's the same as accepting a no answer. And then criticism includes positive and negative criticism. So praise is actually a criticism. And you'll see that behavior in some of your children or in yourself. When someone gives you a compliment, somebody tells you what a great job you've done, you can't accept it. And within this skill, we still have everyone's favorite skill, which is disagree appropriately. And so we know what we can do in any situation when it's brought to us and someone gives us a criticism. We can drop the subject, which we may ultimately have to do in the end, but we do have the opportunity to speak up and say, hey, I understand this, but what about this? And that's just a game changer for our family.
And just making these connections here to what Rachel had said earlier to Courtney in reference to the story that Courtney told about her daughter wanting to go to bed. And so she was doing the disagree appropriately sequence. And Rachel said, oh, but there is also that she needed to say your point of view. How did you say it, Rachel? What was there?
State the other person's point of view.
So
seek to understand.
Seek to understand. So I like that because when you're given this positive criticism or negative criticism, and you're disagreeing appropriately, then you would also need to say, I understand that you felt that I did this wrong for these reasons, or that I did well, but this is how I see it, and how healthy that is to package together for a child and be able to connect those dots. Because as an adult, if somebody gives me a compliment and I'm like, no, I saw all of these things. Instead, if I were to be like, oh, thank you, I appreciate you saying that. And even if I don't say it out loud to them, like being able to say, this was their point of view and that's valid. And allowing it to be that way instead of being like, that's invalid. You don't know. Just very healthy. And again, just back to that confidence that comes for your child. And it's a true confidence. It's a real understanding and ability to vocalize those thoughts and feelings that our kids have. They're there. And they're raw, and they just need the skills or how to package it and just share it so that they feel understood from you. So that's awesome.
I want to add to the no answer. When I read about that in the book, I thought, you mean to tell me that if you tell a child no, that they're going to accept it?
Say okay?
Like they're going to say okay. And I've been amazed at how it's worked with my children in the last couple months as we've been implementing the TSG methods in our family. And as part of our homeschool journey, like I mentioned earlier in this season, we've started homeschooling. I do keep candy now as every once in a while a reward if a kid really needs motivation to like get through a lesson or just have some extra motivation to try reading. And if I put a candy at the end of a sentence or something for a little kid, like a single Skittle, they get excited. Well, another kid may say, Mom, can I have a piece of candy? And I say, no, this was her reward. And I have been amazed at how my kids will say, okay, and walk away. And I'm like, that's amazing. Whereas previously, I think there would have been some whining and there would have been well, that's not fair because you didn't have the time to do my lesson today. You just did one-on-one time with her and not with me. And I would have gotten, like you would have had this whole thing. And now it's like, okay, and walk off. And it's not like that every time, but it is for the most part. I will ask, so Janice and Rachel, y'all have been doing this for years. Tell me, is that true? Is that what y'all continue to see in your houses? Or is it mostly disagree appropriately? Or is it a lot of okays? Like what does it look like?
Okay and dropping the subject are happening more and more frequently as my children are maturing. But even if they don't, because they're using the skill disagree appropriately, they're saying back, I understand you don't want me to have this candy because, and then they state my reasons behind it. And if they don't understand my reasons behind it, then they need to ask, can I ask why I can't have this candy? And then I'll say, sure, because lunch is in 10 minutes or whatever the case may be. And then they start over and they say, I understand you don't want me to have this candy because lunch is in 10 minutes, but I feel like I'm able to eat my lunch and have a piece of candy or whatever their little reasoning behind it may be. But I just think that ability, being able to be in front brain, use all these skills, stay calm, and grow in empathy towards your reasonings, and then be able to state their own reason. Like, what a powerful thing, what a powerful gift to actually give your children. I know that even in my own household, my husband has actually used this skill with his bosses. And he came home and he was like, kids, you're not going to believe this, but I disagreed appropriately with my boss. It was a big deal, but it went over really well. And that was just fun for them to hear. And of course, they wanted him to tell all the nitty-gritty details, but he was pretty shocked himself that he was able to articulate that and understand where his boss was coming from and let his boss know where he was coming from as well.
That's great. Do y'all remember the movie Matilda?
Yes.
So one of the scenes that kind of stands out in it is when Danny DeVito, the father, is looking at the daughter who's about his height, right, at this point. And he's like, I'm big, you're small.
I'm right, you're wrong.
You're wrong. I'm smart, you're dumb. He just goes through this, like, I'm this, you're this moment. And the way that, the cinematography with it and the angles and just being able to, like, see this. And it's like, you're saying these things, but the way you're behaving is so childlike.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
And it's so obvious to even the daughter who is mature beyond her years. I think back to that because when we reduce ourselves to being the back brain, what we're thinking of in that moment, or like, no, you can't do that because blah, 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 and not giving it the time or knowing ahead of time the parameters of why this is working. And like you've mentioned decision fatigue, but there's just like this feeling of, I'm going into battle. Like I've got to have this fortress of no all the time. And I think back to Danny DeVito being like, I'm strong. And it doesn't have to be that kind of dynamic. That's not what it's supposed to be. The roles are clear, but it's like with respect. So I really appreciate all of this because it gives more just like the rules of the game. I just keep kind of thinking about that. Like everybody's happier when you know the rules of the game and you can actually play it.
Exactly.
It's not flipping the pieces over because nothing makes sense anymore. And sometimes we end up doing it to ourselves. We make the rules not make sense for kids. Mm-hmm. And
yes,
it's really good to understand and that they're proven out with other families and that there are mentors such as yourselves that have gone through this. That's really comforting as moms because it's not as if we've had kids before. And so we're learning and growing. And that's what it's supposed to be, is like a growth opportunity for all of us within the families. I feel like it's just light bulb moments over and over again.
I love that you say that because what we've seen in our family is as we do this, and this is the other piece, like you were saying that you're starting the book and there's just so much. And you were saying like, oh, I'm pulling all these connections. That doesn't stop for a long time. And that's a piece that we're not even getting into today. Y'all aren't even going to touch in these series is prepping and pre-teaching. And so in our family, we see so many okays, so many saying okay and being okay, because we've learned how to pre-teach well. And that changes everything. So we've had this conversation before we went into the store, before the breakfast that everyone hates, before whatever thing is. And as Courtney was saying, having a reward, I love that you said reward, not a bribe, because a bribe is different. The difference is that if you tell them before, this is what will happen if you make this choice, we're going to have candy. And if you make this choice, you're going to choose this negative consequence. You're telling them ahead. So then you're not bribing them and saying, oh, do this, please, please. Again, going into a power struggle, you're not bribing them, you're rewarding them. And so when you pre-teach things, it just shifts the whole dynamic of everything. And then when we do have disagree appropriately, because that's still everyone's favorite skill to use, you just have to stop and look at your children and remember back when I was 12, I was talking to Rachel about this very thing this week. And when I was 12, my brain already was so like wired to want a fight. And I was so convinced already that I couldn't be understood and that I couldn't understand my parents. I didn't want to have a conversation. And I was like, look, my 12-year-old wants to disagree appropriately with me. And he's going to try and understand my point of view. And he's going to try to explain his point of view. Like he wants this connection. And already I was against that connection by that age. And I was like, how can I do anything but want to hear, want to take the time? Because this is what it's about. This is my family. This is what matters. And so even when you don't get the okay, when you get the disagree appropriately, it's important.
Well, I think it's encouraging to hear that your preteens want to talk to you, because everybody always says when they're little, I had kids who had speech impediments. And so people would always say, well, this is the phase you go through. You want them in speech so that they can start talking, and then they'll start talking and they'll never shut up. And then they hit teenager and you never hear from them again. And I always just thought that's so depressing to think of that. So I love to hear about preteens talking to their parents. And even if it is disagreeing appropriately, because in that step that you've described last week, part of that process is understanding where the other person is coming from. So the fact that a preteen or teenager could understand where you're coming from and could express that and articulate that, what great speaking skills you're also instilling in a child to be able to speak up for themselves. So yes, there's a great conversation that's happening, so you're relating to each other, but also you're empowering a child to be able to vocalize what their thoughts are. And like you said, get out of that back brain into the front brain and reason, which are skills that are very hard for all of us to have. I also really like that you talk about dropping the subject, because I think that's important for the child and for the parent. Have y'all found that dropping the subject as a parent is hard sometimes, or how does that work in your lives?
It was a hard one for me. I still threw grown-up tantrums, right? And then I was like, my kids keep throwing tantrums. This is terrible. I'm the grown-up here. Wait, this is not right. I think I'm the problem. Oh no, it's me. I have to change me. And then I did, and it changed everything. Dropping the subject, it blows my mind that I can do it. I didn't think it was possible. I would have anxiety. I would replay things, I'd have intrusive thoughts of the conversation, how I wanted to go back and fix it, because I didn't know it was an option to drop the subject. I wanted justice and I wanted to be understood. And so I would, in my mind, just like go over and over and over, and I could never drop the subject. And now I go, oh, I can drop the subject. And I've practiced it over and over, and it works. It works faster. It works better. It works more quickly. And I've seen that for my son, who struggles the most with dropping the subject as well. He had the longest time with me not being able to drop the subject and learning that behavior. And it was probably a year or so into TSG. And I was like, he's not quite there. He's mostly calm, but I'm looking at him and I'm like, there's something not. And I stopped and did a parent counseling session with him. I was like, hey, let's talk about this. What are you thinking when you accept a no answer? And he's like, well, I'm still thinking this. And I'm like, oh, you're not dropping the subject. It's not just dropping the subject with your mouth. It's dropping the subject with your mind. And he was like, is it really? And I was like, yes, that's the part. That's where the freedom is, because then you get to go on and be truly free. Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh, it was an aha moment.
So wonderful.
So Rachel, could you tell us more about the final step or the final skill that we can learn today with following instructions?
Oh, yes. Following instructions. Let me first start by saying that as a parent, you're going to need to be really careful in what you say and how you word your instructions. I was talking to another mom who was trying to give the instruction to her children to stop faffing about. And I was like, I'm sorry, what is faffing about? And how are they supposed to follow this instruction? I don't understand. Can you break it down? So you might think that you're being really clear, but double check yourself and make sure you actually are being clear. And also make sure you're giving obtainable instructions. So you're not going to send your 3-year-old into a room by themselves and tell them, go pick up your whole room. It's just not going to get you the results that you want. You're going to need to break down each task for a small child like that. And you're going to want to give very clear instructions and probably some supervision as they're growing in their capacity to follow instructions. So an example of this at my house is actually, I would instruct my 7-year-old to first put away all his cars and trucks and then check back. And after he did that, I would instruct him to pick up all his magnet tiles, put them away, and check back. I understand that this is going to sound a tad tedious, but my youngest is neurodivergent. So asking him to pick up all his toys at one time would cause immense anxiety, and most likely he would have a meltdown. But when I break down the task for him, he's able to do each piece. And then after he's finished, I point out to him how he actually cleaned the entire room and what a great job he did. And he blooms under this praise. The pride of his accomplishment is so obvious. And I also like the fact that it's passively showing him executive function, which is just a skill that my entire family needs more help with.
I really love this example. I also like that I can relate on the specific items that are in your son's room. You know what I mean? Like, I think anybody can. When you're hearing this, it might feel like, oh, well, how can I break something down? Because I don't really want to go stand and watch over his shoulder. But when you're saying, pick up your trucks first and then report. Okay, now pick up your mag tiles. I'm like, those are literally two things that I'm pretty sure on my son's floor right now.
And books,
always.
always.
Yeah, books and trash. If you're listening to this and you have a son, you could probably say those exact same four things, plus or minus dinosaurs, depending on the age of your kid.
Right.
Absolutely, dinosaurs.
Break it down into those 5 categories and you probably got a clean room. You don't even have to go and stand there necessarily. You could just say it from the kitchen. And now I'm curious about the returning back to you and then reporting on what they did. How does that work in your life? Because I'm still so new at this that my kids forget to report back to me unless I remind them.
Yes.
How old are your kiddos?
My oldest is 8 and my youngest is almost 3.
Yeah. So at the very beginning, I only gave instructions and I would be there with them and watch them just to make sure that we were practicing every single time doing it the right way. Because especially my youngest, if he did it the wrong way and it got away with it, then next time he was going to throw a fit because, well, I did it that way before, or you didn't notice last time. I had a little larger front loading in the beginning of just making sure I was there watching, checking their work and not giving too many instructions at once because I also have ADHD and it's difficult for me and hectic mom brain to be like, okay, what child did I tell to do what? And did they check back? So it was just a great practice for myself to be there with them, watch them do it, check back and just stop what I was doing because I understood too that if we got this down, even if it took more time at the beginning, in the end, it was going to take less time because we invested in it. It is absolute an investment. The more you put in, it's going to compound and you're going to get dividends. And my youngest also, he has anxiety and I would not send him to do tasks super far from me because he's going to be scared or anxious and not want to do it. And I would get a lot of kickback for that.
We give them something that we absolutely know that they can accomplish.
That they're capable of doing,
yes.
And usually within sight of where I am.
I don't know about your house, but there's always something within my sight that needs picked up off my floor. Where does it come from?
There's for sure something on the floor. Pick it up, please.
Yes.
I think it's a big indication of the love that you have for your children because you don't give just empty instruction. You're not giving something just to give something. That's right. The idea is that they have this moment in the end where you can point out what they did and you're benefited by seeing them bloom. That phrase, like you said, I love that. It feels good for both to be in that situation together. And those are what we look forward to as parents is having this kind of connection built up because of the instruction and they have that cause and effect built up again in their mind. And the next time, maybe you can give 2 at a time, kind of build on it.
Absolutely. Once his capacity grows, then yes, you can give more complicated instructions. You can give 1 or 2 instructions and have them check back. Plus, you have that confidence that they are going to check back. But actually, something that you just said reminded me that when it comes to instructions, if it is given as a consequence, it does not have to be negative. And it does not need to create distance between you and your child. Your consequence can absolutely be stay here with mama and let's cook some cookies. Or it can be here with mama and let's serve your brothers and sisters. We're going to make plates for lunch and you're going to pass them out. You're going to be the one to serve them. Like you can incorporate your life so that it's not something that's complicating or taking away from things you need to accomplish, because I know we're all about that go accomplishments. And it doesn't need to be negative. We're not punishing our children. We're discipling them. We are giving them a cause and an effect, and that can be positive as well. We can create connection even in times of correction. It doesn't have to be disconnect.
What I like about that is that I relate to that. It doesn't have to be a negative consequence. And I remember early on, I mean, we're still early on in this, but 2 months ago when we first started this, one of the consequences that I gave one of my children, their response was, "Ooh, I like doing that," in kind of a sassy attitude. Like, you just thought you punished me, but I like that. Like, because I think it was setting the table. And the point that's actually made in the Parenting a House United book is that sometimes they will like the chore and they will bring that up to you, that they like the extra chore. But that doesn't mean that this plan is failing. What it means is they have now lost the freedom of doing whatever they were previously doing to do what you're asking them to do. In that moment, the extra chore they've earned takes them away from playing outside with their siblings. Now they have to help set the table. So they might still enjoy the chore, but you're putting them on the clock of, now you've earned this extra chore, this consequence. So it can be something they enjoy doing. And it was kind of funny at first, because when I heard that from this particular child, "Oh, I like doing that," I was like, this was already foretold to me in the book that you would say this.
Right. Well, and there's no more manipulation, and there's no more punishing. There's no more, you need to feel bad. It's helping them want to do right.
Right. It's so empowering. I've loved this discussion so much, ladies. And I have to say, for anyone listening to this and thinking, this is all new jargon, and it is. When I first learned it, I thought the same thing. It has been very, very transformative in our family for the last couple of months. I've really enjoyed it. And it's been very helpful for me because prior to this, I really subscribed to this kind of other parenting method. And I won't even bring it up, the specific title of it, but there was this approach to consequences or punishments that was based on the child's nature. And so if a child was more calm, then the best consequence for a child who is more calm by nature, or who's more connected, who's more of an empath, is to put them in timeout, because that consequence or that punishment would hurt more in a way. If you put them in isolation and they really want connectedness, that will teach them. That's the consequence for that child. Whereas a child that's more of a perfectionist, which when you said, Janice, that you're an oldest child, I relate to that. I'm also an oldest child. So one of my biggest buzzwords that like makes me cringe inside is if somebody says disappointed. So a child that kind of relates to that, like that they're more of a perfectionist, if you as a parent just say, "Oh, I'm so disappointed in you," then that would be a very good consequence or punishment for that child, because that appeals to their nature. So you're really almost like targeting specific consequences for those children, which was kind of what I was doing, but it was also really hard to keep track of which kid gets which consequence, who gets a timeout, who gets being told that I'm disappointed in, who gets you have to clean the baseboards, like a reaction, because they're an action reaction child. And so they might get this. So every child almost had like a different consequence for them. And so I have 4 kids who have very different natures. And so I was trying to keep track of that. And then they were feeling like I wasn't treating them fairly because, well, all you did was tell so-and-so you're disappointed in. Tell me you're disappointed in me, because I don't care if you tell me that. I was like, this is not working. So then when this fell into my lap, it's suddenly fair. So anyway, I love that y'all are talking about this, because this whole concept and hearing how it actually plays out in your life has been very helpful for me, because I'm still at the beginning stages of this. So it has been extremely helpful, and learning from y'all has been so beneficial for me and for Carly. Thank you for joining us. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you all so much.
So, ladies, what is a good call to action for our sisters this week?
Well, using these fundamental skills can create so much success in so many areas. But even if you teach these skills daily, you won't be able to see the connection that you want. You won't live your family mission or reach your vision if your tone isn't right. So my call to action is to notice your tone. Take a deep breath before you speak. Look into your children's eyes when you speak and feel love and trust toward them. Believe the best of them. I know this can be hard when we have such deep neural pathways and lifelong habits of lecturing or snapping, griping, yelling, whatever it may be. So at first, just notice and practice and see what a difference that alone makes. But if you're really struggling to have a loving, trusting tone for several weeks, you could practice daily in the mirror. You could Marco Polo your spouse or your friend or your sister. You could record yourself So just you rewatch them, your interactions with your children, and hold yourself accountable, and then watch your home transform and see that your home really can be what you envision.
Thank you, Janice. And for any of our sisters who happen to listen to this week's episode and didn't get a chance to listen to the first two, make sure to go listen to those as well. And I love that this call to action incorporated the call to action from last week from Rachel, looking into our children's eyes. You guys make me believe that there can be calmness in momness, like you're calm as a mom. And thank you, English language, for having those things rhyme. Calm, mom. But just thinking about it that way, like being ourselves, being able to harness our own emotions in those times, connect with our children. I love it.
So Janice, Rachel, are there any other concluding thoughts that we have not yet gotten to talk about that y'all can share with our sisters before we let you go, which is going to kill me? I just want to keep talking.
So my concluding thought today is that if we can do this, you can do this. We aren't some calm, happy family who woke up this way. Our journeys have been filled with trauma and recovery and hard-won victories. And that's exactly why we're so passionate about sharing teaching self-government principles and skills, because we're proof that it is possible to become united as families. And we want that for you and all your listeners too.
Amen. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. I love hearing you say, if we can do this, you can do this, because I know that there's strength in a sisterhood. We are all sisters. We're grateful that we got to meet y'all and that we can now consider you part of our sisterhood. So thank you for joining us, Sister Rachel and Sister Janice. We're so glad y'all are here. And sisters, we invite you listening to make sure you go back and check out last week's episode where we did talk about the other two teaching self-government skills. So be sure to listen to both of these episodes so you get the full package, because we really dove deep and it was such a fun conversation. And there's still so much more to cover. So we are grateful that y'all have joined us on this journey. This has been so empowering and inspirational and just everything that I was envisioning when we reached out to these ladies and hope that they would come join us. So sisters, we remind you to check our show notes for any resources that we've referenced today. We'll include the Instagram handles that Rachel and Janice mentioned in last week's episode, so you can go find them. Actually, Rachel and Janice, why don't we repeat those in case our sisters just want to hear them out loud one more time, where they can find y'all. Go ahead, Janice.
I'm at Encouraged Mama on Instagram and the TSG website.
Perfect. And where can our sisters find you, Rachel?
They can find me on the Teaching Self-Government website under Shane and Rachel Moss Mentors. And then my Instagram page is Bossy Mossy.
Love it. So we'll have Bossy Mossy Calm Mom. No, just kidding.
Go, Mom.
Okay. Well, we are so excited to connect with y'all today and to stay connected. And sisters, we hope y'all have a blessed and wonderful week. Don't forget to check our show notes for those resources, for those links that we've talked about, and the minute marker timeline, so you can jump back to any part of this conversation that you've liked and you want to re-listen to. And don't forget to share this episode if you've learned something and you think somebody you know could benefit from it as well. We will talk to y'all next week, sisters. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
I like the calmness and malmness.
So good.
Let's get a bumper sticker. Love it.
Except for like my car might not look super calm.
You'll
I
get there.
get a couple laughs.